When you mix up some of the most successful elements from mainstream gaming together and add them in a completely new setting, you can get something truly refreshing and unique. That is, if you dare to stray off from the standard cookie cutter formula and try something new. So you have Tarkov, the modern extraction shooter, then you have Hunt, which is Wild West plus zombies, and now we have Dark and Darker, the medieval one with magic, skeletons, goblins, and all kinds of creatures straight out of Dungeons and Dragons. But what makes it so good? First of all, is the atmosphere and the sense of adventure that you feel each time you delve into the dungeons. It embodies the old school dungeon crawler so well, from the menu to the moment you get taken down by some random goblin. Everything seems somehow familiar, but new and fresh at the same time. Even the inventory reminds you of some better days. The days when everything was more simple and Diablo was actually good. And you already know the classes. The rogue is the sneaky one that creeps around and gives you a heart attack when he starts stabbing you in the face out of nowhere. The mindless brute that hits you like a truck with anything that they can get their hands on. The magic wielding one that shoots fire, lightning and all that stuff. And the bard, the one that always gets bullied while in a party. Another thing to appreciate about Dark and Darker is the fact that it doesn't hold your hand. The learning curve is steep but rewarding if you manage to get over the initial struggle. After all, figuring out how to actually play a game is part of the fun. You are just thrown into the dark dungeons and will learn everything as you go, by dying many times and hopefully learning something new each time, because you will continue to suck otherwise. But you will keep going back because you will tell yourself that this time will be different and you will finally manage to extract with your bags full of riches and gear. Or maybe this time you will try a different build or class. It doesn't matter the reason. By this time you will already be hooked and looking for your next fix of dungeon crawling. And don't beat yourself too much if your first couple of runs go like this. Or like this. There's nothing wrong with you. You need to learn to be patient because you're always a step away from dying in this game. In time, you will get to learn the attack patterns of different mobs and where they spawn. The PvE gameplay has a bit of Dark Souls feeling to it. It's simplistic, punishing, and rewarding. And these are just the NPCs, don't forget that there are also real players to fight and you will also need to extract. There will be no victory royale dance if you don't extract, and you will be back at the table of sadness with your default loadout. This is what AAA games fail to do nowadays. They treat their players like they are mentally impaired or something, spoon-feeding them each bit of content and guiding them at each step. The overall combat is not as sweaty as in other medieval combat games out there, as you can't feint attacks or do all kinds of crazy moves to trick your opponent. Each melee weapon has a set attack pattern and that's basically it. And it works well considering all the other things that are going on in the game. You will outplay your enemies with proper positioning, planning, and by hitting your shots and spells. In time you will learn to distinguish between the different weapons and their attack combos. This way you will learn the range and angles that you need to be aware of when fighting someone. All the fighting and dungeon crawling is happening on these handcrafted maps that are great at further immersing you into the game's fantasy. From tight corridors to open spaces that span multiple stories. There is something there for every playstyle and class. Everything works so well together and the game is really atmospheric. It feels like a first-person D&D experience as you wander through these dark corridors and rooms filled with traps, monsters and treasure. The stakes are always high because you can lose everything if you take a wrong turn or if you are too impatient. And that's one of the reasons that makes it so addicting. It has an immense replay value because of the high risk, high reward loop where you are always guessing what's behind the corner, and even if you end up extracting without killing any other fellow adventurers, the sense of accomplishment is still there. The different classes are also a reason to keep coming back as there are loads of playstyles and builds to explore by mixing and matching abilities, gear and weapons. And if you manage to successfully extract with your bags filled with loot, There is a whole new aspect of the game to explore now, through the various merchants and by trading with other players. Each vendor has a different purpose and will buy, sell and craft various items. They will have a set number of items available for sale that will restock every 30 minutes. Sometimes these are useful for yourself and you can straight up buy and use them, but you can also buy the ones that are good for other classes and flip them on the player marketplace. Or you can also gamble your gold at the goblin merchant if you're feeling lucky. There are also quests to complete for each merchant that will offer some decent rewards, and this also adds to the whole game fantasy, and the whole experience stretches beyond the time that you spent in the dungeons. They did a great job with the menu because it's straightforward and easy to understand, unlike Hunt where you can't understand anything from that overcomplicated menu. I'm not saying that Dark and Darker is a perfect game, as they still have a lot of stuff to fix and figure out. As an early access game, it has a great base concept with a lot of potential, even the devs don't fuck up somehow. Right now there are some issues with the skill-based and gear-based matchmaking system that make lobbies quite sweaty. This is never a good thing, as no one likes a sweat fest, and if a game is not appealing to the casual players, it will most likely fail. Just look at Mordhau. These games are appealing to a very small group of players and will end up being abandoned by regular players who just want to have some fun. The new multi-class system also seems a bit off, since in these types of games, class identity is something really important. It ruins the whole fantasy of the game and makes everything even harder to balance. Again, this will open the door for more min-maxing and sweat, and that will eventually kill the game. Look, Dark and Darker won't be the next competitive esport, and casual players won't care about meta, competitive modes and all that. We are here just for some fun dungeon crawling adventure with a sprinkle of chaotic PvP. If I want to grind some ranks, I can just jump on League or Counter-Strike. Let's just hope that the devs will listen to the feedback from their community and set up a good direction for further updates. Regarding the other issues with the lawsuit and Steam takedown, a year ago the game was popping up everywhere. When it was on Steam, it had a huge popularity spike as everyone was playing it and was talking positively about it. However, a AAA company decided that it was their idea in the first place and sued them, attempting to take down the game. Since then, we had a few updates and it seems like Iron Mace is still allowed to keep the game online until the lawsuit concludes and we have an official decision. Sadly, because of all this, Dark and Darker will probably not be back on Steam until all the legal issues are resolved. Iron Mace made some progress in making the game accessible again, and it's available on their own launcher, which is lightweight and does the job. It was also added to the Epic Store recently, and it seems like it's heading in a good direction overall when it comes to exposure. Overall, the whole game concept of Dark and Darker has a huge potential, as it really brought something new to the table. Even if it's work in progress at the moment, the game is still fun if you don't get too invested into the ranking system and just play casually for the fun of delving into the dungeons and the sense of adventure. But let me know what you think about the game in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.